the book, but you can't really learn it by just reading a book. So it's important that you focus on this now and have a practice of it in this lesson, so you get the basics, and then you can practice a little bit at home. But it's actually quite simple. Once you've done it once, it's a bit like learning to ride a bike or something. You get the feel of it, and then you just need to practice a little. So what we've got here is a lighter, which you've just drawn with a chrome cap. And a lot of products have little chrome elements on it. It's a bit way of giving a bit of shininess and interest, and a point of interest in your product. It's also functional. But what we see here is basically different grey tones, some quite extreme highlights, but also some reflections. So you can see here this little line. It's basically the reflection of this gap here. And that is one of the keys to drawing chrome, is putting reflections in the surface. So you want to be strategic about how you set up your sketch, so that you can put easy kind of reflections in ones that you can control, on ones that are obvious as an effect of reflections. We'll go through to the next image. What you often have with a chrome element is this sort of stripe, and as you can see, they're really quite dark. It's something that you have to kind of get the courage to do it, because there's always a risk that you muck up your drawing, putting a big black, almost a black line down the side of it or in the middle. And the danger of doing this is that it just ends up looking like you've got a pot with stripes painted on it, like some sort of wallpaper pattern. What stops it looking like that is these little edges. See how they curve around at the edges? Anytime the surface direction changes, and nearly all products have little roundings at least, you'll see that happens. Also this light edge here, which breaks that stripe. This is a photograph, and it has a simplified version of the chrome effect. When you're drawing, it's better to avoid a big line straight down the middle. It doesn't really work so as well, and it's a little bit confusing. So, but you can see little reflections in here. Here you see the reflection of the handle on the side here. There's some reflections here and here. And you can see that on this stripe, which is coming up here, it sort of shoots along that edge a little bit. See those curves? Those are important little bits of detail that say it's a chrome element and not just a black line down the middle of your product. Well, you also have different tones of grey and almost white grey. So this, you can see it's a more yellowy tone, and here it's a little bit more blue. So those slight differences are important, and those things you can get by using a chalk gradient. With a ball it becomes really misformed, stretched out. But can you see what's in there? Can you see what's in the reflection?
Yeah, fingers, window,
handful. A person, one person, two people.
It's a cash ball.
So there's a lot in there. We don't necessarily want to draw all those kind of reflections. The goal of a product design sketch is just to say, okay, this is a chrome element. Chrome is basically a mirror, so anything around it is going to reflect into the surface. So if you had an incredible complex thing, a tree or something, or a coloured surface with all sort of things, a Rubik's Cube or something like that, you wouldn't really want to put that next to the object and have a million colours in that surface. So you want a simple kind of surface which gives an obvious and standard generic kind of reflection. Here again you see the big, really dark stripes which follow the curves of the object. Again, this is a kind of confusing shadow to use in a product design sketch. So we generally put the light the darker edges on the sides. But and you can see what's happening in the reflections. Another room. Here you see the kind of the stripes, which are common to a cylinder shape, but they're bending and stretching around, following the surfaces. Again, this stripiness on the spout here, and a reflection of, actually I think these are buildings. So this is outside. I think this might have been shot in Amsterdam. It looks a little bit like a gevel. Yeah. As you can see, there's standard kinds of reflections, standard kind of curves, and it's about getting a generic curve that works. You know, when you see here, you see there's a kind of stripiness. Look, if you look at this model, you see the same. Basically, what's happening with the reflections is they're being compressed, they're being pushed together, and because they're being pushed together so much, they become stripes. If I put this on a surface, you can see what's happening. That red is sort of shooting up. It's getting these funny things. This is quite a complicated reflection, which doesn't necessarily support, your volume. It can look confusing, even though it's possible and it's realistic. It tends to look like, if you draw this, it tends to look like you've got flames, a flame pattern on the bottom of your cup, which is so. This also represents chrome, the stripes, dark and light stripes, and it's less confusing. What you could do is if you drew a background, like a bulb behind it, that some of the red might come into one of those stripes. That would help show that it's a reflective surface. But here you see basically, a sort of stripes. Here it's a dark stripe. Basically, one of the stripes here is the light one on the top, and there's the floor. There's highlights, and that's the sort of effect you want to try and get. Those stripes run right through. Again, the stripes. Remember the different tones of grey. On less shiny products, it's a little bit less intense. It's a bit less contrast, a bit more flat. And here you see a good example of it's a photograph, but this is a sort of way to get a cylinder.
Hallo, jongens.
Ik denk dat ik op middelbare school les geef.
Ja, echt.
The stripiness is basically, if we look at this, compare, it's fairly similar, and this is easy to do with a marker, just some different grey tones, and then a chalk gradient. Usually one side will have a kind of an ochre chalk gradient, the other side more blue, and combining that is a standard trick of drawing from. So let's have a look at some renderings. Now you can see, in this image, you can really see the similarity. Again, just simple. These are, if we look at this image, this is a render marker done with all the same materials. You've got all the materials to do a sketch.